Chapter 22 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 22. Moral Sunshine. I have gout, asthma, and 7 other maladies, but am otherwise very well. Sydney Smith. The inborn geniality of some people amounts to genius. Whipple. This one sits shivering in Fortune's smile, taking his joy with bated, doubtful breath. This other, gnawed by hunger all the while, laughs in the teeth of death. T.B. Aldrich. There is no real life but cheerful life. Addison. Next to the virtue, the fun in this world is what we can least spare. Agnes Strickland. Joy in one's work is the consummate tool. Phillips Brooks. Joy is the mainspring in the whole of endless nature's calm rotation. Joy moves the dazzling wheels that roll in the great timepiece of creation. Schiller. He is as stiff as a poker, said a friend of a man who could never be coaxed or tempted to smile. Stiff as a poker, exclaimed another. Why, he would set an example to a poker. Even Christians are not celebrated for entering into the joy of their Lord. We are told that Pascal would not permit himself to be conscious of the relish of his food. He prohibited all seasonings and spices, however much he might wish for and need them, and he actually died because he forced his diseased stomach to receive at each meal a certain amount of aliment, neither more nor less, whatever might be his appetite at the time, or his utter want of appetite. He wore a girdle armed with iron spikes, which he was accustomed to drive in upon his body, his fleshless ribs, as often as he thought himself in need of such admonition. He was annoyed and offended if any in his hearing might chance to say that they had just seen a beautiful woman. He rebuked a mother who permitted her own children to give her their kisses. Toward a loving sister, who devoted herself to his comfort, he assumed an artificial harshness of manner for the express purpose, as he acknowledged, of revolting her sisterly affection. And all this sprung from the simple principle that earthly enjoyment was inconsistent with religion. We should fight against every influence which tends to depress the mind, as we would against a temptation to crime. A depressed mind prevents the free action of the diaphragm and the expansion of the chest. It stops the secretions of the body, interferes with the circulation of the blood in the brain, and deranges the entire functions of the body. Scrofula and consumption often follow protracted depressions of mind. That fateful murmur, which is heard in the upper lobes of the lungs in the first stages of consumption, often follows depressed spirits after some great misfortune or sorrow. Victims of suicide are almost always in a depressed state from exhausted vitality, loss of nervous energy, dyspepsia, worry, anxiety, trouble, or grief. Mirth is God's medicine, says a wise writer. Everybody ought to bathe in it. Grim care, moroseness, anxiety, all the rust of life ought to be scoured off by the oil of mirth. It is better than emery. Every man ought to rub himself with it. A man without mirth is like a waggon without springs, in which one is caused disagreeably to jolt by every pebble over which it runs. A man with mirth is like a chariot with springs, in which one can ride over the roughest roads and scarcely feel anything but a pleasant rocking motion. I have told you, said Southey, of the Spaniard who always put on spectacles when about to eat cherries, in order that the fruit might look larger and more tempting. In like manner, I make the most of my enjoyments, and though I do not cast my eyes away from my troubles, I pack them in as a small compass as I can for myself, and never let them annoy others. We all know the power of good cheer to magnify everything. Travellers are told by the Icelanders, who live amid the cold and desolation of almost perpetual winter, that Iceland is the best land the sun shines upon. You are on the shady side of 70, I expect, was asked of an old man. No, was the reply. I am on the sunny side, for I am on the side nearest to glory. A cheerful man is preeminently a useful man. He does not cramp his mind, nor take half views of men and things. He knows that there is much misery, but that misery need not be the rule of life. He sees that in every state people may be cheerful. The lambs skip, birds sing and fly joyously, puppies play, kittens are full of joyance, the whole air full of careering and rejoicing insects, that everywhere the good outbalances the bad, and that every evil has its compensating balm. Bishop Fenelon is a delicious man, said Lord Peterborough. I had to run away from him to prevent his making me a Christian. Hume, the historian, never said anything truer than, to be happy, the person must be cheerful and gay, not gloomy and melancholy. A propensity to hope and joy is real riches, one to fear and sorrow, real poverty. Dr. Johnson once remarked with his point and pith that the custom of looking on the bright side of every event was better than having £1,000 a year income. But Hume rated the value in dollars and cents of cheerfulness still higher. He said he would rather have a cheerful disposition, always inclined to look on the bright side of things, than to be a master of an estate with £10,000 a year. We have not fulfilled every duty unless we have fulfilled that of being pleasant. If a word or two will render a man happy, said a Frenchman, he must be a wretch indeed who will not give it. It is like lighting another man's candle with your own, which loses none of its brilliancy by what the other gains. The sensible young man, in theory at least, chooses for his wife one who will be able to keep his house, to be the mother of sturdy children, one who will of all things meet life's experiences with a sweet temper. It is impossible to imagine a pleasant home with a cross wife, mother or sister, as its presiding genius, and it is a rule, with exceptions, that good appetite and sound sleep induce amiability. If, with these advantages, a girl or woman, boy or man, is still snappish or surly, why, it must be due to her or his total depravity. Some things she should not do. She should not dose herself, or study up her case, or plunge suddenly into vigorous exercise. Moderation is a safe rule to begin with, and, indeed, to keep on with. Moderation in study, in work, in exercise, in everything except fresh air, good simple food, and sleep. Few people have too much of these. The average girl at home can find no more sanitary gymnastics than in doing part of the lighter housework. This sort of exercise has object and interest and use, which raises it above mere drill. Add to this a merry romp with younger brothers and sisters, a brisk daily walk, the use of a few moments twice a day of dumbbells in a cool airy room, and it is safe to predict a steady advance towards that ideal state of being in which we forget our bodies and just enjoy ourselves. It is not work that kills men, says Beecher, it is worry. Work is healthy. You can hardly put more on a man than he can bear. But worry is rust upon the blade. It is not movement that destroys machinery, but friction. Helen Hunt says there is one sin which seems to be everywhere, and by everybody is underestimated and quite too much overlooked in valuations of character. It is the sin of fretting. It is as common as air, as speech, so common that unless it rises above its usual monotone, we do not even observe it. Watch any ordinary coming together of people, and we see how many minutes it will be before somebody frets, that is, makes more or less complaint of something or other, which probably every one in the room or car or the street corner knew before, and which most probably nobody can help. Why say anything about it? It is cold, it is hot, it is wet, it is dry. Somebody has broken an appointment, ill-cooked a meal, stupidity or bad faith somewhere has resulted in discomfort. There are plenty of things to fret about. It is simply astonishing how much annoyance and discomfort may be found in the course of everyday living, even of the simplest, if one only keeps a sharp eye out on that side of things. Some people seem to be always hunting for deformities, discords, and shadows, instead of beauty, harmony, and light. We are born to trouble as sparks fly upward. But even to the sparks flying upward in the blackest of smoke, there is a blue sky above, and the less time they waste on the road, the sooner they will reach it. Fretting is all time wasted on the road. About two things we should never fret: that which we cannot help, and that which we can help. Better to find one of your own faults than 10 of your neighbours'. It is not the troubles of today, but those of tomorrow and next week and next year, that whiten our heads and wrinkle our faces. Every man we meet looks as if he'd gone out to borrow trouble, with plenty of it on hand, said a French lady driving in New York. The pendulum of a certain clock began to calculate how often it would have to swing backward and forward in the week and the month to come. Then, looking further into the future, it made a calculation for a year, etc. The pendulum got frightened and stopped. Do one day's work at a time. Do not worry about the trouble of tomorrow. Most of the trouble in life is borrowed trouble, which never actually comes. As all healthy action, physical, intellectual, and moral, depends primarily on cheerfulness, says E.P. Whipple, and as every duty, whether it be to follow a plough or to die at the stake, should be done in a cheerful spirit, the exploration of the sources and conditions of this most vigorous, exhilarating, and creative of the virtues may be as useful as the exposition of any topic of science or system of prudential art. Christ, the great teacher, did not shut himself up with monks, away from the temptation of the great world outside. He taught no long-faced, gloomy theology. He taught the gospel of gladness and good cheer. His doctrines are touched with the sunlight and flavoured with the flowers of the fields. The birds of the air and the beasts of the field and happy romping children are in them. True piety is cheerful as the day. Cranmer cheers his brother martyrs, and Latimer walks with a face shining with cheerfulness to the stake, upholds his fellow spirits, and seasons all his sermons with pleasant anecdotes. Nothing will supply the want of sunshine to peaches, said Emerson, and to make knowledge valuable you must have the cheerfulness of wisdom. In answer to the question, how shall we overcome temptation, a noted writer said, cheerfulness is the first thing, cheerfulness is the second, and cheerfulness is the third. A habit of cheerfulness, enabling one to transmute apparent misfortunes into real blessings, is a fortune to a young man or young woman just crossing the threshold of active life. He who has formed a habit of looking at the bright, happy side of things, who sees the glory in the grass, the sunshine in the flowers, sermons in stones, and good in everything, has a great advantage over the chronic dyspeptic, who sees no good in anything. His habitual thought sculptures his face into beauty, and touches his manner with grace. We often forget that the priceless charm which will secure to us all of these desirable gifts is within our reach. It is the charm of a sunny temper, a talisman more potent than station, more precious than gold, more to be desired than fine rubies. It is an aroma whose fragrance fills the air with the odours of paradise. It is from these enthusiastic fellows, says an admirer, that you hear, what they fully believe, bless them, that all countries are beautiful, all dinners grand, all pictures superb, all mountains high, all women beautiful. When such a one has come back from his country trip after a hard year's work, he has always found the cosiest of nooks, the cheapest houses, the best of landladies, the finest views, and the best dinners. But with the other the case is indeed altered. He has always been robbed. He has positively seen nothing. His landlady was a harpy. His bedroom was unhealthy, and the mutton was so tough that he could not get his teeth through it. He goes on to talk of the sun in his glory, says Isaac Walton, the fields, the meadows, the streams which they have seen, the birds which they have heard. He asks, what would the blind and deaf give to see and hear what they have seen? Of Lord Robert's sunshiny face, Rogers said, he always comes to breakfast like a man upon whom some sudden good fortune has fallen. But oh, for the glorious spectacles worn by the good-natured man! Oh, for those wondrous glasses, finer than the Claude Lorraine glass, which throws a sunlit view over everything, and makes the heart glad with little things, and thankful for small mercies. Such glasses had honest Isaac Walton, who, coming in from a fishing expedition on the River Lee, burst out in such grateful little talks as this: let us, as we walk home under the cool shade of this honeysuckle hedge, mention some of the thoughts and joys that have possessed my soul since we two met, and that our present happiness may appear the greater, and we more thankful for it. I beg you to consider with me How many do at this very time lie under the torment of the gout or the toothache? And this we have been free from. And let me tell you that every misery I miss is a new blessing. The hypochondriac who nurses his spleen never looks forward cheerfully, but lounges in his invalid chair and croaks like a raven, foreboding woe. Ah, says he, you will never succeed. These things always fail. The thug of India, whose prayer is a homicide, and whose offering is the body of a victim, is melancholy. The Fijian, waiting to smash the skull of a victim and to prepare a bacola for his gods, is gloomy as fear and death. The melancholy of the Eastern Jews after their black fast, and the ill temper of monks and nuns after their Fridays and Wednesdays, is very observable. It is the recompense which a proud nature takes out of the world for its selfish sacrifice. Melancholia is the black bile which the Greeks presumed overran and pervaded the bodies of such persons, and fasting does undoubtedly produce this. I once talked with a Rosicrucian about the great secret, said Addison. He talked of it as a spirit that lived in an emerald and converted everything that was near it to the highest perfection. It gives lustre to the sun, said he, and water to the diamond. It irradiates every metal, and enriches lead with the property of gold. It brightens smoke into flame, flame into light, and light into glory. A single ray dissipates pain and care from the person on whom it falls. Then I found his great secret was content. My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds and Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy. Shakespeare. Yet with a heart that's ever kind, a gentle spirit gay, you've spring perennial in your mind, and round you make a May. Thackeray. End of chapter 22.
Chapter 23 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 23. Hold up your head. Thoroughly to believe in one's own self, so one's self were thorough, were to do great things. Tennyson. If there be a faith that can remove mountains, it is faith in one's own power. Marie Ebner-Eschenbach. Let no one discourage self-reliance. It is, of all the rest, the greatest quality of true manliness. Kossuth. It needs a divine man to exhibit anything divine. Trust thyself. Every breast vibrates to that iron string. Accept the place that divine providence has found for you, the society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. Great men have always done so. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of our own mind. Emerson. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Shakespeare. Yes, said a half-drunken man in a cellar to a parish visitor, a young girl, I am a tough and a drunkard, and am just out of jail, and my wife is starving. But that doesn't give you the right to come into my house without knocking to ask questions. Another zealous girl declared in a reform club in New York City that she always went to visit the poor in her carriage, with the crest on the door and liveried servants. It gives me authority, she said. They listen to my words with more respect. The Fraulein Barbara, who founded the Home for Degraded and Drunken Sailors in London, used other means to gain influence over them. I, too, she would say, taking the poor applicant by the hand when he came to her door. "I too, as well as you, am one of those for whom Christ died. We are brother and sister, and we'll help each other." An English artist, engaged in painting a scene in the London slums, applied to the Board of Guardians of the Poor in Chelsea for leave to sketch into it, as types of want and wretchedness, certain picturesque paupers then in the almshouse. The board refused permission on the ground that, quote, "a man does not cease to have self-respect and rights because he is a pauper, and that his misfortunes should not be paraded before the world," unquote. The incident helps to throw light on the vexed problem of the intercourse of the rich with the poor. Kind but thoughtless people, who take up the work of, quote, "slumming," unquote, intent upon elevating and reforming the needy classes, are apt to forget that these unfortunates have self-respect and rights and sensitive feelings. "But I am not derided," said Diogenes, when someone told him he was derided. "Only those are ridiculed who feel the ridicule and are discomposed by it." Dr. Franklin used to say that if a man makes a sheep of himself, the wolves will eat him. Not less true is it that if a man is supposed to be a sheep, wolves will very likely try to eat him. "O God, assist our side," prayed the Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, a general in the Prussian service, before going into battle. At least, avoid assisting the enemy, and leave the result to me. "If a man possesses the consciousness of what he is," said Schelling, "he will soon also learn what he ought to be. Let him have a theoretical respect for himself, and a practical will soon follow." A person under the firm persuasion that he can command resources virtually has them. "Humility is the part of wisdom, and is most becoming in men," said Kossuth. "But let no one discourage self-reliance. It is, of all the rest, the greatest quality of true manliness." Froude wrote, "A tree must be rooted in the soil before it can bear flowers or fruit. A man must learn to stand upright upon his own feet, to respect himself, to be independent of charity or accident. It is on this basis only that any superstructure of intellectual cultivation worth having can possibly be built." "I think he is a most extraordinary man," said John J. Ingalls, speaking of Grover Cleveland. "While the Senate was in session to induct Hendricks into office, I had an opportunity to study Cleveland as he sat there like a sphinx. He occupied a seat immediately in front of the vice president's stand, and from where I sat I had an unobstructed view of him. I wanted to fathom, if possible, what manner of a man it was who had defeated us and taken the patronage of the government over to the democracy. We had a new master, so to speak, and a Democrat at that, and I looked him over with a good deal of curiosity. There sat a man, the President of the United States, beginning his rule over the destinies of 60 millions of people, who less than 3 years before was an obscure lawyer, scarcely known outside of Erie County, shut up in a dingy office over a livery stable. He had been mayor of the city of Buffalo at a time when a crisis in its affairs demanded a courageous head and a firm hand, and he supplied them. The little prestige thus gained made him the Democratic nominee for governor, and at a time, his luck still following him, when the Republican party of the state was rent with dissensions. He was elected, and, still more luck, by the unprecedented and unheard-of majority of nearly 200,000 votes. 2 years later his party nominated him for president, and he was elected. There sat this man before me, wholly undisturbed by the pageantry of the occasion, calmly waiting to perform his part in the drama, just as an actor awaits his cue to appear on a stage. It was his first visit to Washington. He had never before seen the Capitol, and knew absolutely nothing of the machinery of government. All was a mystery to him, but a stranger not understanding the circumstances would have imagined that the proceedings going on before him were a part of his daily life. The man positively did not move a limb, shut an eye, or twitch a muscle during the entire hour he sat in the Senate chamber. Nor did he betray the faintest evidence of self-consciousness or emotion. And as I thought of the dingy office over the livery stable but 3 years before, he struck me as a remarkable illustration of the possibilities of American citizenship. But the most marvelous exhibition of the man's nerve and of the absolute confidence he has in himself was yet to come. After the proceedings in the Senate chamber, Cleveland was conducted to the east end of the Capitol to take the oath of office and deliver his inaugural address. He wore a close-buttoned Prince Albert coat, and between the buttons he thrust his right hand, while his left he carried behind him. In this position he stood until the applause which greeted him had subsided, when he began his address. I looked for him to produce a manuscript, but he did not, and as he progressed in clear and distinct tones, without hesitation, I was amazed. With 60 millions of people, yes, with the entire civilized world looking on, this man had the courage to deliver an inaugural address making him President of the United States as coolly and as unconcernedly as if he were addressing a ward meeting. It was the most remarkable spectacle this or any other country has ever beheld. Believe in yourself. You may succeed when others do not believe in you, but never when you do not believe in yourself. "Ah, John Hunter's still hard at work," exclaimed a physician on finding the old anatomist at the dissecting table. "Yes, doctor, and you'll find it difficult to meet with another John Hunter when I am gone. Heaven takes 100 years to form a great genius for the regeneration of an empire, and afterward rests 100 years," said Kaunitz, who had administered the affairs of his country with great success for half a century. "This makes me tremble for the Austrian monarchy after my death." "Isn't it beautiful that I can sing so?" asked Jenny Lind naively of a friend. "My lord," said William Pitt in 1757 to the Duke of Devonshire, "I am sure that I can save this country, and that nobody else can." He did save it. What seems to us disagreeable egotism in others is often but a strong expression of confidence in their ability to attain. Great men have usually had great confidence in themselves. Wordsworth felt sure of his place in history and never hesitated to say so. Dante predicted his own fame. Kepler said it did not matter whether his contemporaries read his books or not. I may well wait a century for a reader, since God has waited 6,000 years for an observer like myself. "Fear not," said Julius Caesar to his pilot frightened in a storm. "Thou bearest Caesar and his good fortunes." When the Directory at Paris found that Napoleon had become, in 1 month, the most famous man in Europe, they determined to check his career, and appointed Kellerman, his associate, in command. Napoleon promptly but respectfully tendered his resignation, saying, "1 bad general is better than 2 good ones. War, like government, is mainly decided by tact." This decision immediately brought the Directory to terms. Emperor Francis was extremely anxious to prove the illustrious descent of his prospective son-in-law. Napoleon refused to have the account published, remarking, "I had rather be the descendant of an honest man than of any petty tyrant of Italy." I wish my nobility to commence with myself, and derive all my titles from the French people. I am the Rudolph of Hapsburg of my family. My patent of nobility dates from the Battle of Montenot. When Napoleon was informed that the British government had decreed that he should be recognized only as a general, he said, "They cannot prevent me from being myself." An Englishman asked Napoleon at Elba who was the greatest general of the age, adding, "I think Wellington." To which the Emperor replied, "He has not yet measured himself against me." Well-matured and well-disciplined talent is always sure of a market, said Washington Irving, but it must not cower at home and expect to be sought for. There is a good deal of cant, too, about the success of forward and impudent men, while men of retiring worth are passed over with neglect. But it usually happens that those forward men have that valuable quality of promptness and activity, without which worth is a mere inoperative property. A barking dog is often more useful than a sleeping lion. Self-respect is the early form in which greatness appears. "You may deceive all the people some of the time," said Lincoln. "Some of the people all the time, but not all the people all the time. We cannot deceive ourselves any of the time, and the only way to enjoy our own respect is to deserve it. What would you think of a man who would neglect himself and treat his shadow with the greatest respect?" "Self-reliance is a grand element of character," says Michael Reynolds. "It has won Olympic crowns and Isthmian laurels. It confers kinship with men who have vindicated their divine right to be held in the world's memory." End of chapter 23. Recording by David Martin.
Chapter 24 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 24. Books and Success. Ignorance is the curse of God, knowledge the wing wherewith we fly to heaven. Shakespeare. Prefer knowledge to wealth, for the one is transitory, the other perpetual. Socrates. If a man empties his purse into his head, no man can take it away from him. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Franklin. My early and invincible love of reading I would not exchange for the treasures of India. Gibbon. If the crowns of all the kingdoms of the empire were laid down at my feet in exchange for my books and my love of reading, I would spurn them all. Fénelon. Who of us can tell what he had been had Cadmus never taught the art that fixes into form the thought, had Plato never spoken from his cell, or his high harp blind Homer never strung? Bulwer. When friends grow cold, and the converse of intimates languishes into vapid civility and commonplace, these only continue the unaltered countenance of happier days, and cheer us with that true friendship which never deceived hope nor deserted sorrow. Washington Irving. Do you want to know, asks Robert Collier, how I managed to talk to you in this simple Saxon? I read Bunyan, Crusoe, and Goldsmith when I was a boy, morning, noon, and night. All the rest was task-work. These were my delight, with the stories in the Bible, and with Shakespeare, when at last the mighty master came within our doors. The rest were as senna to me. These were like a well of pure water, and this is the first step I seem to have taken of my own free will toward the pulpit. I took to these as I took to milk, and, without the least idea of what I was doing, got the taste for simple words into the very fibre of my nature. There was day school for me until I was 8 years old, and then I had to turn in and work 13 hours a day. From the days when we used to spell out Crusoe and Old Bunyan, there had grown up in me a devouring hunger to read books. It made small matter what they were, so they were books. Half a volume of an old encyclopedia came along, the first I'd ever seen. How many times I went through that I cannot even guess. I remember that I read some old reports of the Missionary Society with the greatest delight. There were chapters in them about China and Labrador. Yet I think it is in reading, as it is in eating. When the first hunger is over, you begin to be a little critical, and will by no means take to garbage if you are of a wholesome nature. And I remember this because it touches this beautiful valley of the Hudson. I could not go home for the Christmas of 1839, and was feeling very sad about it all, for I was only a boy, and sitting by the fire, an old farmer came in and said, "I noticed thou's fond of reading, so I brought thee summat to read." It was Irving's sketch-book. I had never heard of the work. I went at it, and was as them that dream. No such delight had touched me since the old days of Crusoe. I saw the Hudson and the Catskills, took poor Rip at once into my heart, as everybody has, pitied Ichabod while I laughed at him, thought the old Dutch feast a most admirable thing, and long before I was through, all regret at my lost Christmas had gone down with the wind, and I had found out there are books and books. That vast hunger to read never left me. If there was no candle, I poked my head down to the fire, read while I was eating, blowing the bellows, or walking from one place to another. I could read and walk 4 miles an hour. The world centred in books. There was no thought in my head of any good to come out of it. The good lay in the reading. I had no more idea of being a minister than you elder men, who were boys then in this town, had that I should be here tonight to tell this story. Now, give a boy a passion like this for anything, books or business, painting or farming, mechanism or music, and you give him thereby a lever to lift his world, and a patent of nobility, if the thing he does is noble. There were 2 or 3 of my mind about books. We became companions, and gave the roughs a wide berth. The books did their work too about that drink, and fought the devil with a finer fire. In education, says Herbert Spencer, the process of self-development should be encouraged to the fullest extent. Children should be led to make their own investigations, and to draw their own inferences. They should be told as little as possible, and induced to discover as much as possible. Humanity has progressed solely by self-instruction, and that to achieve the best results each mind must progress somewhat after the same fashion is continually proved by the marked success of self-made men. "My books," said Thomas Hood, "kept me from the ring, the dog-pit, the tavern, and the saloon. The associate of Pope and Addison, the mind accustomed to the noble though silent discourse of Shakespeare and Milton, will hardly seek or put up with low or evil company or slaves." "When I get a little money," said Erasmus, "I buy books, and if any is left, I buy food and clothes." "Hundreds of books read once," says Robertson, "have passed as completely from us as if we had never read them, whereas the discipline of mind got by writing down, not copying, an abstract of a book which is worth the trouble, fixes it on the mind for years, and, besides, enables one to read other books with more attention and more profit." "This habit of reading, I make bold to tell you," says Trollope, "is your pass to the greatest, the purest, and the most perfect pleasures that God has prepared for his creatures. Other pleasures may be more ecstatic, but the habit of reading is the only enjoyment I know in which there is no alloy." The Bible was begun in the desert in Arabia ages before Homer sang and flourished in Asia Minor. Millions of books have since gone into oblivion. Empires have risen and fallen. Revolutions have swept over and changed the earth. It has always been subject to criticism and obloquy. Mighty men have sought its overthrow. Works of Greek poets, who catered to men's depraved tastes, have, in spite of everything, perished. The Bible is a book of religion, and can be tried by no other standard. Read Plutarch, said Emerson, and the world is a proud place, peopled with men of positive quality, with heroes and demigods standing around us who will not let us sleep. There is no business, no avocation whatever, says Wittenbach, which will not permit a man who has an inclination to give a little time every day to the studies of his youth. All the sport in the park, said Lady Jane Grey, is but a shadow of that pleasure I find in Plato. In the lap of eternity, said Heinsius, among so many divine souls I take my seat with so lofty a spirit and such sweet content, that I pity all the great ones and rich men that have not this happiness. Death itself divides not the wise, says Bulwer. Thou meetest Plato when thine eyes moisten over the Phaedo. May Homer live with all men forever. When a man reads, says President Porter, he should put himself into the most intimate intercourse with his author, so that all his energies of apprehension, judgment, and feeling may be occupied with and aroused by what his author furnishes, whatever it may be. If repetition or review will aid him in this, as it often will, let him not disdain or neglect frequent reviews. If the use of the pen, in brief or full notes, in catchwords or other symbols, will aid him, let him not shrink from the drudgery of the pen and the commonplace book. Reading is to the mind, says Addison, what exercise is to the body. As by the one health is preserved, strengthened, and invigorated, by the other virtue, which is the health of the mind, is kept alive, cherished, and confirmed. There is a world of science necessary in choosing books, said Bulwer. I have known some people in great sorrow fly to a novel or the last light book in fashion. One might as well take a rose draught for the plague. Light reading does not do when the heart is really heavy. I am told that Goethe, when he lost his son, took to study a science that was new to him. Ah, Goethe was a physician who knew what he was about. When I served, when a young man, in India, said a distinguished English soldier and diplomatist, when it was the turning point in my life, when it was a mere chance whether I should become a mere card-playing, hookah-smoking lounger, I was fortunately quartered for 2 years in the neighborhood of an excellent library, which was made accessible to me. Books, says E.P. Whipple, are lighthouses erected in the great sea of time. As a rule, said Benjamin Disraeli, the most successful man in life is the man who has the best information. You get into society in the widest sense, says Geikie, in a great library, with the huge advantage of needing no introductions and not dreading repulses. From that great crowd you can choose what companions you please, for in the silent levees of the immortals there is no pride, but the highest is at the service of the lowest, with a grand humility. You may speak freely with any without a thought of your inferiority, for books are perfectly well bred and hurt no one's feelings by any discriminations. Sir William Waller observed, "In my study I am sure to converse with none but wise men, but abroad it is impossible for me to avoid the society of fools." It is the glorious prerogative of the empire of knowledge, says Webster, that what it gains it never loses. On the contrary, it increases by the multiple of its own power. All its ends become means, all its attainments help to new conquests. At this hour, 500 years since their creation, says De Quincey, the tales of Chaucer, never equaled on this earth for their tenderness and for life of picturesqueness, are read familiarly by many in the charming language of their natal day, and by others in the modernization of Dryden, of Pope, and Wordsworth. At this hour, 1,800 years since their creation, the pagan tales of Ovid, never equaled on this earth for the gaiety of their movement and the capricious graces of their narrative, are read by all Christendom. There is no past so long as books shall live, says Lytton. No wonder Cicero said that he would part with all he was worth so he might live and die among his books, says Geikie. No wonder Petrarch was among them to the last, and was found dead in their company. It seems natural that Bede should have died dictating, and that Leibnitz should have died with a book in his hand, and Lord Clarendon at his desk. Buckle's last words, "My poor book," tell a passion that forgot death, and it seemed only a fitting farewell when the tears stole down the manly cheeks of Scott as they wheeled him into his library when he had come back to Abbotsford to die. Southey, white-haired, a living shadow, sitting stroking and kissing the books he could no longer open or read, is altogether pathetic. No entertainment is so cheap as reading, says Mary Wortley Montague, nor any pleasure so lasting. Good books elevate the character, purify the taste, take the attractiveness out of low pleasures, and lift us upon a higher plane of thinking and living. It is not easy to be mean directly after reading a noble and inspiring book. The conversation of a man who reads for improvement or pleasure will be flavored by his reading, but it will not be about his reading. Perhaps no other thing has such power to lift the poor out of his poverty, the wretched out of his misery, to make the burden-bearer forget his burden, the sick his sufferings, the sorrower his grief, the downtrodden his degradation, as books. They are friends to the lonely, companions to the deserted, joy to the joyless, hope to the hopeless, good cheer to the disheartened, a helper to the helpless. They bring light into darkness and sunshine into shadow. 25 years ago, when I was a boy, said Rev. J. A. James, a schoolfellow gave me an infamous book which he lent me for only 15 minutes. At the end of that time it was returned to him, but that book has haunted me like a spectre ever since. I have asked God on my knees to obliterate that book from my mind, but I believe that I shall carry down with me to the grave the spiritual damage I received during those 15 minutes. Did Homer and Plato and Socrates and Virgil ever dream that their words would echo through the ages and aid in shaping men's lives in the 19th century? They were mere infants when on earth in comparison with the mighty influence and power they now yield. Every life on the American continent has in some degree been influenced by them. Christ, when on earth, never exerted 1/1,000,000th part of the influence he wields today. While he reigns supreme in few human hearts, he touches all more or less, the atheist as well as the saint. On the other hand, who shall say how many crimes were committed the past year by wicked men buried long ago? Their books, their pictures, their terrible examples live in all they reach and incite to evil deeds. How important, then, is the selection of books which are to become a part of your being. Knowledge cannot be stolen from us. It cannot be bought or sold. We may be poor, and the sheriff may come and sell our furniture, or drive away our cow, or take our pet lamb, and leave us homeless and penniless. But he cannot lay the law's hand upon the jewelry of our minds. Good books and the wild woods are two things with which man can never become too familiar, says George W. Keeble. The friendship of trees is a sort of self-love and is very wholesome. All intimate nature is but a mirror, and it is greater far to have the sense of beauty than it is to be only its insensible depository. The books that inspire imagination, whether in truth or fiction, that elevate the thoughts, are the right kind to read. Our emotions are simply the vibrations of our soul. The moment fiction becomes mendacious, it is bad, for it induces us to believe a lie. Fiction, purely as fiction, must be innocent and beautiful, and its beauty must be more than skin deep. Every field of art is a playground, and we are extra pleased when the artist makes that field a gymnasium also. Cotton Mather's Essay to do Good, read by the boy Franklin, influenced the latter's whole life. He advised everybody to read with a pen in hand and to make notes of all they read. James T. Fields visited Jesse Pomeroy, the boy murderer, in jail. Pomeroy told him he had been a great reader of blood and thunder stories, that he'd read 60 dime novels about scalping and other blood performances, and he thought there was no doubt that these books had put the horrible thoughts into his mind which led to his murderous acts. Many a boy has gone to sea and become a rover for life under the influence of Marryat's novels. Abbott's Life of Napoleon, read at the age of 7 years, sent one boy whom I knew to the army before he was 14. Many a man has committed crime from the leavening, multiplying influence of a bad book read when a boy. The chaplain of Newgate Prison in London, in one of his annual reports to the Lord Mayor, referring to many fine-looking lads of respectable parentage in the city prison, said that he discovered that all these boys without exception had been in the habit of reading those cheap periodicals which were published for the alleged amusement of youth of both sexes. There is not a police court or a prison in this country where similar cases could not be found. One can hardly measure the moral ruin that has been caused in this generation by the influence of bad books. In the parlour window of the old mossy vicarage where Coleridge spent his dreamy childhood lay a well-thumbed copy of that volume of Oriental fancy, the Arabian Nights, and he has told us with what mingled desire and apprehension he was wont to look at the precious book, until the morning sunshine had touched and illuminated it, when, seizing it hastily, he would carry it off in triumph to some leafy nook in the vicarage garden, and plunge delightedly into its maze of marvels and enchantments. Beecher said that Ruskin's works taught him the secret of seeing, and that no man could ever again be quite the same man or look at the world in the same way after reading him. Samuel Drew said, "Locke's essay on the understanding awakened me from stupor, and induced me to form a resolution to abandon the grovelling views I had been accustomed to maintain." An English tanner, whose leather gained a great reputation, said he should not have made it so good if he had not read Carlyle. The lives of Washington and Henry Clay, which Lincoln borrowed from neighbors in the wilderness, and devoured by the light of the cabin fire, inspired his life. In his early manhood he read Paine's Age of Reason and Volney's Ruins, which so influenced his mind that he wrote an essay to prove the unreliability of the Bible. These two books nearly unbalanced his moral character, but fortunately the books which fell into his hands in after years corrected this evil influence. The trend of many a life for good or ill, for success or failure, has been determined by a single book. The books which we read early in life are those which influence us most. When Garfield was working for a neighbor, he read Sinbad the Sailor and the Pirate's Own Book. These books revealed a new world to him, and his mother with difficulty kept him from going to sea. He was fascinated with the sea life which these books pictured to his young imagination. The Voyages of Captain Cook led William Carey to go on a mission to the heathen. The Imitation of Christ and Taylor's Holy Living and Dying determined the character of John Wesley. Shakespeare and the Bible, said John Sharp, made me Archbishop of York. The Vicar of Wakefield awakened the poetical genius in Goethe. "I have been the bosom friend of Leander and Romeo," said Lowell. "I seem to go behind Shakespeare and to get my intelligence at first hand. Sometimes in my sorrow a line from Spenser steals in upon my memory as if by some vitality and external volition of its own, like a blast from the distant trump of a knight pricking toward the court of Faery, and I am straightway lifted out of that sadness and shadow into the sunshine of a previous and long-agone experience." Who gets more enjoyment out of eating, asks Amos R. Wells, the pampered millionaire whose tongue is the wearied host of myriads of sugary, creamy, spicy guests, or the little daughter of the laborer, trotting about all the morning with helpful steps, who has come a long 2 miles with her father's dinner to eat it with him from a tin pail? And who gets the more pleasure out of reading, the satiated fiction glutton, her brain crammed with disordered fragments of countless scenes of adventure, love, and tragedy, impatient of the same old situations, the familiar characters, the stale plots? She, or the girl who is fired with a love for history, say, who wants to know all about the grand old, queer old Socrates, and then about his friends, and then about the times in which he lived, and then about the way in which they all lived, then about the Socratic legacy to the ages. Why will that girl ever be done with the feast? Can you not see, looking down on her joy with a blessing, the very lord of the banquet, who has ordered all history, and ordained that the truth he fashions shall be stranger always than the fiction man contrives? Take the word of a man who has made full trial of both. Solid reading is as much more interesting and attractive than frivolous reading, as solid living is more recreative than frivolous living. I solemnly declare, said Sydney Smith, that but for the love of knowledge I should consider the life of the meanest hedger and ditcher as preferable to that of the greatest and richest man in existence, for the fire of our minds is like the fires which the Persians burn in the mountains. It flames night and day, and is immortal, and not to be quenched. Upon something it must act and feed, upon the pure spirit of knowledge, or upon the foul dregs of polluting passions. Therefore, when I say in conducting your understanding, love knowledge with a great love, with a vehement love, with a love coeval with life, what do I say but love innocence, love virtue, love purity of conduct, love that which, if you are rich and great, will vindicate the blind fortune which has made you so, and make men call it justice. Love that which, if you are poor, will render your poverty respectable, and make the proudest feel it unjust to laugh at the meanness of your fortunes. Love that which will comfort you, adorn you, and never quit you, which will open to you the kingdom of thought, and all the boundless regions of conception, as an asylum against the cruelty, the injustice, and the pain that may be your lot in the world. That which will make your motives habitually great and honourable, and light up in an instant 1,000 noble disdains at the very thought of meanness and of fraud. Do I feel like hearing an eloquent sermon? Spurgeon and Beecher, Whitefield, Hall, Collier, Phillips Brooks, Canon Farrer, Dr. Parker, Talmage are all standing on my bookcase, waiting to give me their greatest efforts at a moment's notice. Do I feel indisposed and need a little recreation? This afternoon I will take a trip across the Atlantic, flying against the wind and over breakers without fear of seasickness on the ocean greyhounds. I will inspect the world-renowned Liverpool docks, take a run up to Hawarden, call on Mr. Gladstone, fly over to London and take a run through the British Museum and see the wonderful collection from all nations. Go through the National Art Gallery, through the Houses of Parliament, visit Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace, call upon Queen Victoria, the Prince of Wales, take a run through the Lake region and call upon the great writers, visit Oxford and Cambridge, cross the English Channel, stop at Rouen, where Joan of Arc was burned to death by the English, take a flying trip to Paris, visit the tomb of Napoleon, the Louvre Gallery, take a peep at one of the greatest pieces of sculpture in existence, the Venus de Milo, which a rich and ignorant person offered to buy if they would give him a fresh one. Take a glance at some of the greatest paintings in existence along the miles of galleries. Take a peep into the Grand Opera House, the grandest in the world, to make room for which 427 buildings were demolished. Promenade through the Champs-Élysées, pass under the triumphal arch of Napoleon. Take a run out to Versailles and inspect the famous palace of Louis XIV, upon which he spent perhaps $100 million. Do I desire to hear eloquent speeches? Through my books I can enter the Parliament and listen to the thrilling oratory of Disraeli, of Gladstone, of Bright, of O'Connor. They will admit me to the floor of the Senate, where I can hear the matchless oratory of a Webster, of a Clay, of a Calhoun, of a Sumner, of Everett, of Wilson. They will pass me into the Roman Forum, where I can hear Cicero, or the rostrums of Greece, where I may listen spellbound to the magic oratory of a Demosthenes. No matter how poor I am, says Channing, no matter though the prosperous of my own time will not enter my obscure dwelling, if the sacred writers will enter and take up their abode under my roof, if Milton will cross my threshold to sing to me of paradise, and Shakespeare to open to me the worlds of imagination and the workings of the human heart, and Franklin to enrich me with his practical wisdom, I shall not pine for the want of intellectual companionship, and I may become a cultivated man, though excluded from what is called the best society in the place where I live. With the dead there is no rivalry, says Macaulay. In the dead there is no change. Plato is never sullen. Cervantes is never petulant. Demosthenes never comes unseasonably. Dante never stays too long. No difference of political opinion can alienate Cicero. No heresy can excite the horror of Bossuet. Heed not the idle assertion that literary pursuits will disqualify you for the active business of life, says Alexander H. Everett. Reject it as a mere imagination, inconsistent with principle, unsupported by experience. The habit of reading may become morbid. There is a novel-reading disease. There are people who are almost as much tied to their novels as an intemperate man is tied to his bottle. The more of these novels they read, the weaker their minds become. They remember nothing, they read for the stimulus. Their reasoning powers become weaker and weaker, their memory more treacherous. The mind is ruined for healthy intellectual food. They have no taste for history or biography or anything but cheap, trashy, sensational novels. The passive reception of other men's thoughts is not education. Beware of intellectual dram drinking and intellectual dissipation. It is emasculating. Beware of the book which does not make you determined to go and do something and be something in the world. The great difference between the American graduate and the graduates from the English universities is that the latter have not read many books superficially, but a few books well. The American graduate has a smattering of many books, but has not become master of any. The same is largely true of readers in general. They want to know a little of everything. They want to read all the latest publications, good, bad, and indifferent, if it is only new. As a rule, our people want light reading, something to read that will take up the attention, kill time on the railroad or at home. As a rule, English people read more substantial books, older books, books which have established their right to exist. They are not so eager for recent publications. Joseph Cook advises youth to always make notes of their reading. Mr. Cook uses the margins of his books for his notes, and marks all of his own books very freely, so that every volume in his library becomes a notebook. He advises all young men and young women to keep commonplace books. We cannot too heartily recommend this habit of taking notes. It is a great aid to memory, and it helps wonderfully to locate or to find for future use what we have read. It helps to assimilate and make our own whatever we read. The habit of taking notes of lectures and sermons is an excellent one. One of the greatest aids to education is the habit of writing out an analysis or a skeleton of a book or article after we've read it, also of a sermon or a lecture. This habit has made many a strong, vigorous thinker and writer. In this connection we cannot too strongly recommend the habit of saving clippings from our readings wherever possible of everything which would be likely to assist us in the future. These scrapbooks, indexed, often become of untold advantage, especially if in the line of our work. Much of what we call genius in great men comes from these notebooks and scrapbooks. How many poor boys and girls who thought they had no chance in life have been started upon noble careers by the grand books of Smiles, Todd, Matthews, Munger, Whipple, Geikie, Thayer, and others. You should bring your mind to the reading of a book or to the study of any subject as you take an axe to the grindstone, not for what you get from the stone, but for the sharpening of the axe. While it is true that the facts learned from books are worth more than the dust from the stone, even in much greater ratio is the mind more valuable than the axe. Bacon says, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. That is, some books are to be read only in parts, others to be read, but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. Reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. And therefore, if a man write little, he had need have a great memory; if he confer little, he had need have a present wit; and if he read little, he had need have much cunning to seem to know that he doth not. Histories make men wise, poets witty, the mathematics subtle, natural philosophy deep, morals grave, logic and rhetoric able to contend. End of chapter 24.
Chapter 25 of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 25. Riches Without Wings. Walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. Abundance consists not alone in material possession, but in an uncovetous spirit. Selden. Less coin, less care. To know how to dispense with wealth is to possess it. Reynolds. Rich, from the very want of wealth, is heaven's best treasures peace and health. Gray. Money never made a man happy yet. There is nothing in its nature to produce happiness. The more a man has, the more he wants. Instead of filling a vacuum, it makes one. Franklin. There are treasures laid up in the heart, treasures of charity, piety, temperance, and soberness. These treasures a man takes with him beyond death, when he leaves this world. Buddhist Scriptures. It is better to get wisdom than gold, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Better a cheap coffin and a plain funeral after a useful, unselfish life, than a grand mausoleum after a loveless, selfish life. I ought not to allow any man, because he has broad lands, to feel that he is rich in my presence. I ought to make him feel that I can do without his riches, that I cannot be bought, neither by comfort, neither by pride. And although I be utterly penniless, and receiving bread from him, that he is the poor man beside me. Emerson. I don't want such things, said Epictetus to the rich Roman orator who was making light of his contempt for money wealth. And besides, said the Stoic, you are poorer than I am, after all. You have silver vessels, but earthenware reasons, principles, appetites. My mind to me a kingdom is, and it furnishes me with abundant and happy occupation in lieu of your restless idleness. All your possessions seem small to you, mine seem great to me. Your desire is insatiate, mine is satisfied. Lord, how many things are in the world of which Diogenes hath no need, exclaimed the Stoic, as he wandered among the miscellaneous articles at a country fair. One would think, said Boswell, that the proprietor of all this, Kettlestone, the seat of Lord Scarsfield, must be happy. Nay, sir, said Johnson, all this excludes but one evil, poverty. What property has he left behind him? People ask when a man dies. But the angel who receives him asks, what good deeds hast thou sent before thee? What is the best thing to possess? Asked an ancient philosopher of his pupils. One answered, nothing is better than a good eye, a figurative expression for a liberal and contented disposition. Another said, a good companion is the best thing in the world. a third chose a good neighbor, and a fourth a wise friend. But Eleazar said, "A good heart is better than them all." "True," said the master, "thou hast comprehended in 2 words all that the rest have said. For he that hath a good heart will be contented, a good companion, a good neighbor, and will easily see what is fit to be done by him." "My kingdom for a horse," said Richard III of England, amid the press of Bosworth Field. "My kingdom for a moment," said Queen Elizabeth on her deathbed. And millions of others, when they have felt earth, its riches and power slipping from their grasp, have shown plainly that deep down in their hearts they value such things as naught, when really compared with the blessed light of life, the stars and flowers, the companionship of friends, and far above all else, the opportunity of growth and development here, and the preparation for future life. Queen Caroline Matilda of Denmark wrote on the window of her prison, with her diamond ring, "Oh, keep me innocent, make others great." "These are my jewels," said Cornelia to the Campanian lady who asked to see her gems, and she pointed with pride to her boys returning from school. The reply was worthy the daughter of Scipio Africanus and wife of Tiberius Gracchus. The most valuable production of any country is its crop of men. "I will take away thy treasures," said a tyrant to a philosopher. "Nay, that thou canst not," was the retort. "For, in the first place, I have none that thou knowest of. My treasure is in heaven, and my heart is there." Some people are born happy. No matter what their circumstances are, they are joyous, content, and satisfied with everything. They carry a perpetual holiday in their eye and see joy and beauty everywhere. When we meet them, they impress us as just having met with some good luck, or that they have some good news to tell you. Like the bees that extract honey from every flower, they have a happy alchemy which transmutes even gloom into sunshine. In the sick room they are better than the physician, and more potent than drugs. All doors open to these people. They are welcome everywhere. We make our own worlds, and people them, while memory, the scribe, faithfully registers the account of each as we pass the milestones dotting the way. Are we not, then, responsible for the inhabitants of our little worlds? We should fill them with the true, the beautiful, and the good, since we are endowed with the faculty of creating. "Genius," says Whipple, "may almost be defined as the faculty of acquiring poverty." It is the men of talent who make money out of the work of the men of genius. Somebody has truly said that the greatest works have brought the least benefit to their authors. They were beyond the reach of appreciation before appreciation came. There is an Eastern legend of a powerful genius who promised a beautiful maiden a gift of rare value if she would pass through a field of corn, and, without pausing, going backward, or wandering hither and thither, select the largest and ripest ear, the value of the gift to be in proportion to the size and perfection of the ear she should choose. She passed through the field, seeing a great many well worth gathering, but always hoping to find a larger and more perfect one, she passed them all by, when, coming to a part of the field where the stalks grew more stunted, she disdained to take one from these, and so came through to the other side without having selected any. A man may make millions and be a failure still. Money-making is not the highest success. The life of a well-known millionaire was not truly successful. He had but one ambition. He coined his very soul into dollars. The almighty dollar was his sun, and was mirrored in his heart. He strangled all other emotions, and hushed and stifled all nobler aspirations. He grasped his riches tightly till stricken by the scythe of death, when, in the twinkling of an eye, he was transformed from one of the richest men who ever lived in this world to one of the poorest souls that ever went out of it. Lincoln always yearned for a rounded wholeness of character, and his fellow lawyers called him, quote, "perversely honest." Unquote. Nothing could induce him to take the wrong side of a case, or to continue on that side after learning that it was unjust or hopeless. After giving considerable time to a case in which he had received from a lady a retainer of $200, he returned the money, saying, "Madam, you have not a peg to hang your case on." "But you have earned that money," said the lady. "No, no," replied Lincoln, "that would not be right. I can't take pay for doing my duty." Agassiz would not lecture at $500 a night, because he had no time to make money. Charles Sumner, when a senator, declined to lecture at any price, saying that his time belonged to Massachusetts and the nation. Spurgeon would not speak for 50 nights in America at $1,000 a night, because he said he could do better. He could stay in London and try to save 50 souls. All honor to the comparative few in every walk of life, who, amid the strong materialistic tendencies of our age, still speak and act earnestly, inspired by the hope of rewards other than gold or popular favor. These are our truly great men and women. They labor in their ordinary vocations with no less zeal because they give time and thought to higher things. King Midas, in the ancient myth, asked that everything he touched might be turned to gold, for then he thought he would be perfectly happy. His request was granted, but when his clothes, his food, his drink, the flowers he plucked, and even his little daughter whom he kissed, were all changed into yellow metal, he begged that the golden touch might be taken from him. He had learned that many other things are intrinsically far more valuable than all the gold that was ever dug from the earth. The beggarly Homer, who strolled God knows when, in the infancy and barbarism of the world, was richer far than Croesus, and added more wealth to the world than the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilts, and Goulds. An Arab who fortunately escaped death after losing his way in the desert, without provisions, tells of his feelings when he found a bag full of pearls, just as he was about to abandon all hope. "I shall never forget," said he, "the relish and delight that I felt on supposing it to be dried wheat, nor the bitterness and despair I suffered on discovering that the bag contained pearls." It is an interesting fact in this money-getting era that a poor author, or a seedy artist, or a college president with frayed coat sleeves, has more standing in society and has more paragraphs written about him in the papers than many a millionaire. This is due, perhaps, to the malign influence of money-getting and to the benign effect of purely intellectual pursuits. As a rule, every great success in the money world means the failure and misery of hundreds of antagonists. Every success in the world of intellect and character is an aid and profit to society. Character is a mark cut upon something, and this indelible mark determines the only true value of all people and all their work. Dr. Hunter said, "No man was ever a great man who wanted to be one." Artists cannot help putting themselves and their own characters into their works. The vulgar artist cannot paint a virtuous picture. The gross, the bizarre, the sensitive, the delicate, all come out on the canvas and tell the story of his life. Who would not choose to be a millionaire of deeds, with a Lincoln, a Grant, a Florence Nightingale, a Childs? A millionaire of ideas, with Emerson, with Lowell, with Shakespeare, with Wordsworth. A millionaire of statesmanship, with a Gladstone, a Bright, a Sumner, a Washington. Some men are rich in health, a constant cheerfulness, in a mercurial temperament which floats them over troubles and trials enough to sink a shipload of ordinary men. Others are rich in disposition, family, and friends. There are some men so amiable that everybody loves them, some so cheerful that they carry an atmosphere of jollity about them. Some are rich in integrity and character. "Who is the richest of men?" asked Socrates. "He who is content with the least, for contentment is nature's riches." "Do you know, sir," said a devotee of Mammon to John Bright, "that I am worth 1,000,000 sterling?" "Yes," said the irritated but calm-spirited respondent, "I do, and I know that it is all you are worth." A bankrupt merchant, returning home one night, said to his noble wife, "My dear, I am ruined. Everything we have is in the hands of the sheriff." After a few moments of silence, the wife looked into his face and asked, "Will the sheriff sell you?" "Oh, no." "Will the sheriff sell me?" "Oh, no." "Then do not say we have lost everything. All that is most valuable remains to us: manhood, womanhood, childhood. We have lost but the results of our skill and industry. We can make another fortune if our hearts and hands are left us." "We say a man is made," said Beecher. "What do we mean? That he has got the control of his lower instincts, so that they are only fuel to his higher feelings, giving force to his nature? That his affectations are like vines, sending out all sides blossoms and clustering fruits? That his tastes are so cultivated that all beautiful things speak to him and bring him their delights? That his understanding is opened, so that he walks through every hall of knowledge and gathers its treasures? That his moral feelings are so developed and quickened that he holds sweet commerce with heaven? Oh no, none of these things. He is cold and dead in heart, and mind, and soul. Only his passions are alive. But he is worth $500,000. And we say a man is ruined. Are his wife and children dead? Oh, no. Have they had a quarrel? And are they separated from him? Oh, no. Has he lost his reputation through crime? No. Is his reason gone? Oh, no, it is as sound as ever. Is he struck through with disease? No. He has lost his property, and he is ruined. The man ruined. When shall we learn that a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of things which he possesseth? "How is it possible," asks an ancient philosopher, "that a man who has nothing, who is naked, houseless, without a hearth, squalid, without a slave, without a city, can pass a life that flows easily? See, God has sent you a man to show you that it is possible. Look at me, who am without a city, without a house, without possessions, without a slave. I sleep on the ground. I have no wife, no children, no praetorium, but only the earth and heavens, and one poor cloak. And what do I want? Am I not without sorrow? Am I not without fear? Am I not free? When did any of you see me failing in the object of my desire, or even falling into that which I would avoid? Did I ever blame God or man? Did I ever accuse any man? Did any of you ever see me with a sorrowful countenance? "You are a plebeian," said a patrician to Cicero. "I am a plebeian," replied the great Roman orator. "The nobility of my family begins with me. That of yours will end with you." No man deserves to be crowned with honor whose life is a failure. And he who lives only to eat and drink and accumulate money is surely not successful. The world is no better for his living in it. He never wiped a tear from a sad face, never kindled a fire upon a frozen hearth. There is no flesh in his heart. He worships no god but gold. Why should I scramble and struggle to get possession of a little portion of this earth? This is my world now. Why should I envy others its mere legal possession? It belongs to him who can see it, enjoy it. I need not envy the so-called owners of estates in Boston and New York. They are merely taking care of my property and keeping it in excellent condition for me. For a few pennies for railroad fare whenever I wish, I can see and possess the best of it all. It has cost me no effort, it gives me no care. Yet the green grass, the shrubbery, and the statues on the lawns, the finer sculptures and paintings within, are always ready for me whenever I feel a desire to look upon them. I do not wish to carry them home with me, for I could not give them half the care they now receive. Besides, it would take too much of my valuable time, and I should be worrying continually lest they be spoiled or stolen. I have much of the wealth of the world now. It is all prepared for me without any pains on my part. All around me are working hard to get things that will please me, and competing to see who can give them the cheapest. The little I pay for the use of libraries, railroads, galleries, parks, is less than it would cost me to care for the least of all I use. Life and landscape are mine. The stars and flowers, the sea and air, the birds and trees. What more do I want? All the ages have been working for me. All mankind are my servants. I am only required to feed and clothe myself, an easy task in this land of opportunity. There is scarcely an idea more infectious or potent than the love of money. It is a yellow fever, decimating its votaries, and ruining more families in the land than all the plagues or diseases put together. Instances of its malevolent power occur to every reader. Almost every square foot of land of our continent, during the early buccaneer period, some call it the march of civilization, has been ensanguined through the madness for treasure. Read the pages of our historian Prescott, and you will see that the whole anti-Puritan history of America resolves itself into an awful slaughter for gold. Discoveries were only side issues. Speak, history, who are life's victors? Unroll thy long scroll and say, have they won who first reached the goal, heedless of a brother's rights? And has he lost in life's great race, who stopped to raise a fallen child and place him on his feet again, or to give a fainting comrade care, or to guide or assist a feeble woman? Has he lost who halts before the throne when duty calls, or sorrow, or distress? Is there no one to sing the paean of the conquered who fell in the battle of life, of the wounded, the beaten, who died overwhelmed in the strife? of the low and humble, the weary and broken-hearted, who strove, and who failed in the eyes of men, but who did their duty as God gave them to see it? We have yet no man who has leaned entirely on his character and eaten angels' food, said Emerson, who, trusting to his sentiments, found life made of miracles, who, working for universal aims, found himself fed, he knew not how, clothed, sheltered, and weaponed, he knew not how, and yet it was done by his own hands. At a time when it was considered dangerous to society in Europe for the common people to read books and listen to lectures on any but religious subjects, Charles Knight determined to enlighten the masses by cheap literature. He believed that a paper might be instructive and not be dull, cheap without being wicked. He started the Penny Magazine, which acquired a circulation of 200,000 the first year. Knight projected the Penny Cyclopedia and the Library of Entertaining Knowledge, half-hours with the best authors, and other useful works at a low price. His whole adult life was spent in the work of elevating the common people by cheap yet wholesome publications. He died in poverty, but grateful people have erected a noble monument over his ashes. How many rich dwellings there are, crowded with every appointment of luxury, that are only glittering caverns of selfishness and discontent. Better a dinner of herbs where love is, than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. No man can tell whether he is rich or poor by turning to his ledger, says Beecher. It is the heart that makes a man rich. He is rich or poor according to what he is, not according to what he has. If our thoughts are great and noble, no mean surroundings can make us miserable. It is the mind that makes the body rich. However it be, it seems to me, 'tis only noble to be good. Kind hearts are more than coronets, and simple faith than Norman blood. Tennyson. Be noble, and the nobleness that lies in other men, sleeping but never dead, will rise in majesty to meet thine own. Lowell. End of chapter 25. Recording by David Martin. End of How to Succeed, or Stepping Stones to Fame and Fortune, by Orison Swett Marden.